My name is Henry Thielman. I oversee product development at EQ3. Now more than ever, we have to think about ways of reducing our carbon footprint, and thoughtful products that are inherently non-disposable in function nor design is one of the ways that we contribute to reducing waste. If you haven't seen us in person yet, you can find our flagship store on 7th and 17th in Chelsea. Stay safe.
Okay, welcome back to CLOSEUP. This is part 2 of the North American studio sessions, brought to us by EQ3 and Dwell Magazine. I'm delighted to welcome back William Hanley, Editor-in-Chief of Dwell Magazine.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be back for the second half of the North American Design Studios sections. And big thanks to Wanted and ICFF for putting this together. It's been really great to be talking to designers again after what's been a really strange year. But right now in the studio with us at Industry City, we have Erin Lorek of Lorek Form. Did I say your studio name correctly?
Absolutely.
Based here in Brooklyn. So and thanks so much for joining us in person.
Great, thank you.
And then remotely, we've got Michael Stern and David Lizardo from Leos in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Hi, guys. And also Danielle Trophy, here in Brooklyn as well, but joining us remotely. Hi. So the format for the discussion is going to be a few short videos featuring studio visits with each of the designers that we're talking to get a sense of their work and their practice. And then we'll have a kind of informal Q&A after. But I think we're starting with Michael and Daniel.
Yes, indeed. And CLOSEUP viewers, do choose the selection to go full screen so you can really get the behind the scenes of these amazing studios working in lighting. So let's take a look at Leos and what these two MIT researchers are doing with glass.
Thank you, Daniel.
Leos was started as a space to think about the way we use materials and the way they behave when we fabricate products. It's a question of material truth.
We make glass. We make machines that make glass, and we make software that makes machines move that make glass. Materials don't just sit still and wait to be fabricated. They do things. As glass makers, we always have to respond to how that material moves. The digital processes have to do exactly the same thing. Digital glass is all about the relationship of material behavior, computational power, and our human intuition.
You're never really in control. There's always a tolerance. There's always a physical and a theoretical. Can the designer, even with a computer, exercise that humility to allow material to dictate form, but work with material to create a specific product?
We're not replacing glassblow. Glass knowledge is communal. We're building new tools, asking new questions, seeking to contribute a new voice to the conversation. We have to work with the machine and the material as a collaboration. we designed a molten glass printer. What I mean is that every decision we made was material-centric. The machine only makes sense once it's filled with glass.
The link between digital design and the movement of the machine, the movement of the glass, there's so much feedback between the two that you have to really understand the constraints of the printer and the material in order to be able to design it with a computer. The light patterns were never planned. Kind of. They're a direct result of our designs, but filtered by the material itself. No matter how much you explore these forms, you'll never see the same thing twice.
Natural light is dynamic. When you light a candle, it flickers, it dances, and then it burns out. It sort of anchors us in time. I wanted to create an experience with an electric light that makes us feel a connection to time.
I want to be only half of the design intent. Nature or material can do so much without me. I think we're always looking for the unexpected. Can you evoke a nostalgia for something that never existed?
That process is so cool. I love that it's so technical, but at the same time really elemental. It's almost like cake icing, making a lighting element or something like that. I'm excited to ask a little more about it in a bit.
For sure. I'm personally really excited to see an example of additive manufacturing that's just beautiful and not just there because that's how it was made. That was just inherently beautiful. So we will hear more from Leos. But first, let's bring it back to Brooklyn, and we're going to get some insight into the amazing process of Lorik form right here in Brooklyn.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brooklyn Gas. Come on in. All right. we are. Hello, my name is Erin. My company name is Loric Form. I'm a lighting designer here in Brooklyn, New York. I started off as a theatrical lighting designer, gaffer, rigger in the New York City live entertainment industry. You name it, I did it. And that kind of discipline, that's really us using lights as tools in the air to shape and sculpt the objects that you see and you guys see in the entertainment world. Anything from a model rocking down a runway to like an intimate scene on Broadway to even the inside of MSG, what we're really doing is that we're sculpting the object, but it's happening in a controlled environment. So I started this endeavor here to see how could I make lighting objects that are influenced by their environment. As you can see here, we have the daylight coming in, we have the darkness coming from the back. So how do we do this? So this is a question that I think I'm gonna go through a lot in my life, but my first answer to it comes with my iron cast glass series. From the beginning, what am I doing? I'm creating these iron tools that we're gonna cast glass on. And what I do generally overall is I'm trying to allow all of these flaws and these aberrations to work their way into the iron, which is creating surfaces that allow the light to react and catch it in all these different and surprising ways. So starting from the iron, it's a simple lost wax casting process where we're pouring the iron into a sand shell. The sand shell is made because it was packed around a wax positive. The wax itself was poured onto a clay. So the clay, I allow to crack and get bent and warped a little bit. For this part, I'd love you guys at home, just log into the website. You can kind of poke around in there and see like detail shots of all the textures. And then when we pour the sand on, the sand itself doesn't really give all these flaws, but it does control how frosty or how smooth the glass is gonna be. All of you interior designers and decorators, you might ask, can I make my own textures? Can I make it out of flowers or petals? The answer is absolutely. And you don't even need to use my lights that we're gonna get into later. You can make tiles of glass to make like wall dividers or room dividers. So you can really have like wallpaper of glass that's your own custom texture to decorate the home with. This process, this iron cast glass process, this is the first time this has ever been done. This is a process I discovered in North Carolina in 2017. Basically, what was happening is that there was an iron class next door to my glass class, and they were building an iron furnace, and I said, hey, can I pour glass on top of iron? And somebody said, sure, why not? Let's find out what happens. So I'm kind of the person who's like, let's just see what happens, right? So the result of that is this completely new and unique process, and that's something that I continue to hope to explore in the future. Let's come on inside to Brooklyn Glass. I'm gonna put my mask on to protect my friends. And here they are. This is Josh and Alex, my two awesome assistants, who are also amazing glass artists in their own right. I'm a lighting designer, not by trade, not a glass maker, so without, people like them, I would never get nearly as far as I am today, so I'm very grateful to have them in my life. We're just gonna do a little demo here for you guys. We're doing a basic centrifugal casting where we're spin casting the iron. We're casting on jersey texture today. And you'll see it's just a really simple process. And I think, Josh, what happened last time, just a little bit too much glass was coming out, and then we want to get a little bit tighter. I think we want to split the difference between the first one and the second one. And overall, I think it's just a little too much glass.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so what Alex is doing here, it's just torching the iron. We don't want any thermal shock to happen when we ladle the glass right onto the iron. We don't want the iron to crack because that would be super crappy. Yeah. Open up the furnace. That's 2,300 degrees in there of molten glass. So 23, probably 2,250 today. We're just gonna ladle it right on. I'm using the tool to help Josh draw so he doesn't have to move his arms around. That looks great, buddy. Yeah, a little closer to center. Work your way inside. Wonderful. Let that, give it another twirl. Really just allowing the force of nature, of natural forces to get out there. This is a nice one, huh? And then I just press it down just to give it a nice even, because when we put these in our lights, we do need to have some sort of consistency with the thickness there. How does it get to be a lens shape? Uh-oh, are we too late? Oh no. There we go.
Look at that. That's gonna be a winner.
This is a winner. Smush it around. Beautiful. And you just kind of let it cool and sit in there for a minute until it maintains its shape. And then we put it away in the annealer for, I think, like 36 hours. There you go. The camera, how beautiful. Wait, we have gloves on. We can touch each other for high fives. Yay! Thanks, guys. All right, so now we're gonna come over here. I'm gonna talk to you guys about some of my pieces over on this side of the room. This is the beacon pendant. This is the piece that started it all. So we talked earlier in the beginning about all these different textures of glass, and the reason that I use and fold in all these textures is because the photons of light, they need something to hit against, so they disperse in different ways. So I'm taking advantage of that. What looks like, it just looks like two pieces of glass. What's happening is that the rear lens, is projecting texture onto the front lens, and the front lens conversely is dispersing what's happening in the rear lens. So they have this play, and they have this symbiotic relationship of the two playing together. Further to that, and this is where you designers can start playing, what's happening is because of the position of the light bulb, you're seeing these rings of light around the edges. And as you move around them, you'll see the rings happen. You'll see the rings move in different ways, and then you have these strings above and below. So specifically, the beacon is a two-dimensional object. It really is meant to be hung in front of like a window or a bookcase. It's technically a pendant, but specifically hung from far above. So you can hang it in places that a sconce won't go. So you're playing with these, you can play with scale, and you can kind of sketch these circles and lines against your wall, and kind of really start playing with them in a bunch of different ways. Like I really, really cannot emphasize enough, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Just to touch on these accessories here on the bottom, I added these in. It really brings the eye down to kind of help like anchor the piece in the space. So guys, what you're seeing is these pendants hanging in middle space right now, and that offers them a little bit of clarity. But if you had them behind a wall or against a wall, which is really where they're designed to be, you can see instantly, if I move this in and out, how it's changing how the light interacts with the pieces here. And that's something to consider as you're designing these for your home. So that's the beacon pendant, the one and only, the original. Let's go over this way. This is my new creation. I love this piece. This is the surround pendant. From the beginning, since I started making this glass, the question has always been, how do you hold the glass? How do you hold it without like cutting it or interrupting and just letting the glass be what it's going to be? So what you just saw us make is a surround lens with this negative space in the middle. So you can see that it's just clamped in this ring in this one spot. We don't cut the glass, we don't drill the glass, we don't do anything to the glass except hold it in this one exact spot. This wide steel band, as you move around, provides several functions. We have two hanging positions here. So right now, this pendant can tilt completely, or we have a hanging position in the back, so you can hang it straight down and you can style it in a bunch of different ways. Just like the beacon, the glass needs something to play off of. If you just had this one lens in front of a light bulb, it's just going to be perhaps not as interesting. So I paired it with the reflector. What's happening here, if you look in the front, the relationship of them is such that the reflector is placed so it's pulling, again, that highlightation around the edge of the glass, but also visually, proportionally, the size of them from the front. You have the light bulb circle, then the reflector, then the glass, in this really nice relationship. Now, if you look up here to the top, we have this beautiful canopy with these two stainless steel rings. If you go again to my website, you go loricform.com, sketches, you can see all the different ways that both the beacon and the surround can be used. Specifically, they are adjustable and customizable. You can have them in all sorts of different arrays and different configurations, and that sketches part of my website will help you figure out how you can arrange them. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you to Wanted, thank you to ICFF, thank you to everybody who's had me here today. Enjoy the rest of the sessions, and I'm looking forward to your questions later on. Thanks so much.
Erin, I love the range of textures that you pull out of the glass. It's really fantastic. And the plywood demo moment is great. It really
shining
it
moment.
makes the point hits home.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the pleasure of seeing Lorik Form's work before in person at Lookbook during Wanted Design 2019. But actually seeing how it's made brought it to another dimension for me. Mm-hmm. There's something about actually seeing that process that really brings it alive, even though it was beautiful before, but seeing that really transforms it in the way that I think about your work now. So next up, we're going to hear more from Erin, but we're now going to take a look at a video working with a very different material from Danielle Trophy Design. And just a reminder to viewers to select the full screen experience so you get all the amazing detail in these videos. Let's take a look.
Hello, welcome. Come on in. My name is Danielle Trophy, and welcome to my pop-up studio here at Yoga Tribe, Brooklyn. That's a little bit better. My studio, Danielle Trophy Design, brings innovation through sustainability to the user, whether that's science-based, technology-based, or design-based. We like to bring those intersections together and creating solutions like this lighting that is biodegradable. It's good for the people, it's good for the planet, and it's actually grown using mushroom mycelium. Mycelium is the roots of mushrooms. So we eat the fruiting body, so like apple is the fruit of a tree, mushroom is the fruit of mycelium. So let me show you what we're talking about here. So this is a lampshade that was grown. It was grown over the course of just a few days. Rather than using wood, which could take 10, 20, 30, 100 years to actually be able to grow in order to use it in furniture, we're growing this in just a few days. And it's binding together. So all the white that you see, and it's actually soft and fuzzy. You can actually grow it to feel like a lamb's ear. Agricultural waste, coffee grinds, hemp, any kind of substrate that it can digest and bind to, what it would naturally do in nature. So in nature, mycelium grows beneath the forest floor. It connects all the plants and trees in a forest together. It provides nutrients to all these organisms. It's also nature's composter. It breaks down dying and decaying matter in trees. And we're really kind of borrowing that same recipe, that circular life cycle, and embodying that into the lighting collection. So it's providing nutrients rather than toxins, and there's no off-gassing in your indoor spaces. It's healthy for both people at every step of the production process, and we're not endangering our ecosystems by producing this. What really inspired this lighting collection was, one, realizing that as a designer, I am responsible for the things that I make, for the things that I bring to fruition, for the resources that we are consuming and using. And being able to control what these inputs are for the design is really powerful. And so it was really about discovering and asking questions that hadn't been really asked before. Can we actually grow a product? Can we have it be so safe that you could possibly eat it? And because we're living with these things, these are in our lives day in and day out. And right now we're really aware of our indoor air quality. And to start to realize what different plastics and different glues and toxins are in these indoor environments, it really became a search for finding a better way. We have a studio in Industry City. We created a grow lab. We're growing an entire lighting collection, one of the first in the world to be a commercialized product of a biofabricated product. And that might be a new word for a lot of people. The biofabrication is using a living organism to grow or produce a product for you. And that's what we're doing here. We're biofabricating lampshades. So here we have the living material. It's hemp substrate that's already been inoculated with mycelium. It's in this container. It's keeping contamination away from it, any kind of bacteria that could interfere with the growing environment. We've got our cleaning supplies here and our thermoformed molds that will actually hold the shape of the lampshade while the mycelium is growing and binding to the substrate. Let's begin growing. So first we're going to put on gloves. And sometimes this is kind of scary because you think it could actually harm you, but the reality is you have more bacteria on your hands that could hurt the mycelium than the mycelium could actually hurt you. So it's completely safe. So we're going to open this up. Now, this is already pre-grown, so you can actually start to see the mycelium that's already been growing over a few days. So this is the hemp that's grown in New York, locally sourced. And right here, this is mycelium. All this white that you can see here, you can see that's already binding loosely. So it's really dense, and eventually it's going to grow and bind, so it's just as solid as this. There's no other glues or anything holding this substrate together. It's just mycelium, and you can see all the white that you see. There's nothing added, no paint. That's all mycelium. All right, so let's start to grow. You can control the thickness of it. You can use different kinds of tools. We use thermoform tools, but often a lot of our prototyping begins with just 3D printed PLA tools. That way we can rapidly create some prototypes to see if they're designs that are desirable. So we're just going to pack this in like so. And you can see that all that you can see at the beginning is just this brown hemp. And that's a substrate that it wants to grow to. It's got cellulose based, so it's a woody matter. It's something that it would experience in its natural environment in a forest. And it's going to digest it in this growing process, but it's also going to bind to it. And this is going to happen over the course of just a few days. A lampshade about this size will take about 6 to 7 days growing inside of this shape. And then we'll actually demold it and let it grow a few more days. The final step after it's grown fully is we will let it dry. So we'll place it onto a drying rack like this. We'll demold it and we'll let it air dry, put some fans on it, and then finally bake it. And the baking just renders the material inert. It won't continue to grow. It won't sprout up mushrooms or fruiting bodies. It won't spore, so there's no allergens. And it's a completely safe and inert material at that stage. So you're looking at the Mush Loom lighting collection. And this is our largest. It's a 24-inch diameter dome, followed by an 18-inch and our smaller cup light, and then our trumpet lamp. And the amazing thing about this is the mycelium itself in nature is hydrophobic, and it's also fire resistant. So the lighting in itself, it's perfect for that application. The material is rated grade 8 fire resistant, so they're all UL listed, and they're super lightweight. So visually it might feel like kind of heavy, maybe similar to concrete, but when you touch it, this larger one is actually less than 8 pounds total. So when you can see this, it feels like the weight of almost styrofoam. It's super lightweight, and you can kind of tune the material depending on how you grow it to have different performance properties. So different colorations, you can have greater standoff that makes it really fuzzy and soft. So you actually want to go in and touch the light. We have our largest lighting installation at the One Hotel in Brooklyn Bridge Park. 130 lampshades in the Riverside suite that overlook the Brooklyn Bridge. We are now producing our lampshades, growing them in California. So our partners, Paradise Packaging in Paradise, California, are now growing these lampshades at scale to be competitive in the marketplace. So after 6 years of championing mycelium and bringing this into lighting, it's a great victory to see it take that next step and to be able to literally grow our business. If you want to get your hands on this amazing material and have a lamp for your home, your office, your next project, visit my website, danielletrophy.com or mushloomlighting.com, and follow us on social media. We're always doing really fun events and sometimes some hands-on grow-it-yourself workshops. And and stay in the loop with us and help support this cause of creating more sustainable solutions for us, for everybody.
Danielle, those are fantastic. I really love how they wear their material on their sleeve. They have very clean lines, but you can tell that they're made from this organic process, and they still have a little bit of that mushroom in them, I guess. And I wanted to kick off the Q&A by talking a little bit about the way that material plays into the creative process. Where the types of things that you're working with as designers, all very different, inform the way that the ultimate shape of the object comes out. And I wanted to start with Michael and David just because it's such a fascinating mix of processes, from software to 3D printing to, again, something very elemental like glass. Did you start with the 3D printing side and come to glass later? Did you start with the software? Where did this whole idea to make these lighting elements begin?
I think it came from a sort of range of different sort of diverse experiences. So I got to MIT in 2005 as a freshman, and MIT is a glass blowing program that's really focused on art and the sort of making of glass. So I started blowing glass in 2006, and then in 2014 I had graduated and come back for my master's and started working on a class project on 3D printing, had some industrial experience with it, and found a group of other people who were interested in the idea of trying to print glass, sort of totally without an idea of what would come out of it, just the sort of joy of looking at a new material and asking these new questions with it. And after making that first printer in 2014 and doing some sort of initial studies, it was clear that glass sort of loves light, and that someday we would sort of be interested in making lighting products and bringing this into architecture and homes and restaurants and residences. And so in 2018, when we founded Leos, that was sort of one of our goals.
And the ultimate form is informed by the process. I mean, this is not something that you say in your studio visit video that you necessarily set out with, but that it comes about because of how you're able to 3D print the glass. How do you describe what the ultimate object looks like? They have this kind of beautiful sci-fi quality to them, but also an elegance. We may have lost them briefly. We'll come back to Leos in a second, but it's a good transition to Erin's process. I mean, you've got all of these different textures going on, and you explained the origin story of working with iron, but how do you come to the textures that you're creating? What's your kind of what are you after when you begin the process of are you sketching these out? Are you looking at materials that might work well with the iron process?
That's a great
a
question.
range of spaces.
That's
Great question. So what's happening is I'm looking at materials and fabrics that might possess refractive texture, that might bounce the light around in different and interesting ways. So when I start and I press those fabrics and those textures into raw clay, and then the process from clay to wax to sand to iron to glass, I allow each material to kind of get pushed to the extremes of what that material can do. And those cracks and those fissures and the bubbles that organically happen, they add their own narrative around that original refractive texture. So you're really telling the story. Each material is telling its own story on top of this texture that I chose, and it's kind of weaving itself in and around that texture.
You mentioned textiles. Do you have any sort of favorite materials that you've played with? Or
You know, it's funny.
any that you tried that didn't work?
Oh, there's plenty that I've tried that didn't work. What's funny is that the popular one, the jersey texture, is actually football jersey. So you can see all these little tiny pebbles, and then you can still see, because this is how much the iron picks up, you can still see the fabric in between the little pebbles. And that's why it's called jersey, not because of the state, because it's just a piece of jersey fabric. But my personal favorite, I think, is really the Barber Chair, which is literally just an old barber chair that I pressed into clay.
That's very cool. And do you keep these objects around? Are they in your studio?
Some of them are, but some of them are found objects in the world. So I'll press the clay onto them, kind of like, you know, when you take like a pencil sketch, when you, rubbing is what I think, you know, when you did as a kid. It's kind of the same thing with clay. I just keep, you know, pressing clay on things and see what happens.
I like the out in the world aspect of that process. You're just kind of investigating and seeing what works. You know, we joked a little bit about your plywood demo, but it really was a great way of looking at, you know, the quality of light that these things give. Are you looking for a specific affect when the finished piece? You know, are you looking for a certain sense of luminosity, a certain way of refracting the light when you're looking at the original object, or is that something that's kind of a happy accident in each piece?
I'm definitely looking for more what you might call accidents to happen. I'm trying to develop a glass that, in pulling all of these different textures in, the roughness and the smoothness of the different layers is pulling and playing with light in different ways, so that no matter how you're looking at it, with, you know, with a wall behind it, in the middle of space, in daylight, in lamplight, it's always going to look slightly different. It's not just beautiful when it's lit up, it's meant to be beautiful throughout all times of day.
That's very cool, and it's really, you know, I love how specific each piece is, but also, you know, kind of works for a lot of different applications. It looks like we have Leo's back. Hey guys, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So we had, you know, before the technical difficulties, we were talking a little bit about how you, you know, came to the ultimate form of the work and how that derives from the process. But, you know, what is kind of the intent? Are you sketching this out beforehand? Are you just modeling it? What does the process look like from a kind of formal perspective, in addition to the 3D printing and the software that you work on?
I would say we like to try to create kind of a hierarchy of places to work, where there's maybe a general form or a specific detail that you're looking for, and you want to try to place yourself as the designer as just one kind of cog in a series of different kind of design tools, some of which are computational, some of which are material in the form of the molten glass and the way that it just creates its own form. And you have to kind of find your place to sort of describe what you're looking for. And so some of the things that we've been making are a kind of general way of motion. That's the, I would say, that the overall descriptor of the forms. And then the sort of computer tools that tell the machine how to move have a specific set of parameters that they can and can't do, and so they get to make decisions about how they're going to apply that motion, let's say. And the result is the combination of the human designer, the kind of material designer, and the computer itself.
And how do you describe what the ultimate outcome is? If you're looking at, you know, how this object reflects light and things like that, you know, do you have a way of describing the quality, or what do you like about it?
It's so interesting. It's this emergent quality of light that's sort of very different from, I think, a lot of lighting products that are out there, and something we try to embrace. It creates all these patterns of light and shadow that are a result of the geometry, sometimes that you design, sometimes it's a result of the geometry that's kind of emergent from the material itself. And so there are these kind of gems of an object where you had some control over the design, but the kind of light product itself is maybe the atmosphere that it creates. And so you have this kind of little seed, and then you have its atmosphere. And so it's kind of a two-part light, where you have a small thing and then a big impact. And all sorts of different ways that kind of interacts with the space, through the patterns, through the sort of opacity of the glass. And they're kind of, for the most part, pendants, I think, is the kind of most direct answer of like what these things are. We're trying to hang them usually in spaces where they can cast patterns and create an atmosphere over a great sort of area, and a space to inhabit. But we've explored things that are more sconce-like, that create a splash of patterns across a tableau or across a wall space, and we've done some column-like installations that create patterns all over the floor that you can kind of walk around and interact with. So that it's really kind of challenging to put it in one box, but we try to create something new and different every time.
I love the metaphor of a seed casting the wider pattern. It's a very technical process, but that's a really like organic metaphor. Danielle, your work is literally organic. When did you start working with mushrooms? How did you come to this?
I came across this material about 6 years ago. It was being made by Ecovative in upstate New York, who's a biomaterials company. And at the time, they were using it mainly for packaging as a sustainable version of styrofoam. And I ordered samples of this and was familiar with the process, and just immediately was thinking of lighting for this application. So what I didn't really expect at the time as a designer was that in order to produce the product, we would in fact become a biofabricator in order to launch this lighting. And it's really been an amazing set of years of really diving into the science side of how to bring that into design, and very similar to the companies here as well, is you actually have to create the process yourself to then be able to create the product. So I think materiality really has a unique role in the design industry, especially at the studio level, because there's so much innovation going on with the process.
It sounds like it kind of guides you into a kind of innovation. Is there anything that you're experimenting with now that you think might lead to another process or another collection?
Yeah, definitely exploring a lot of different materials, and mainly sourced from nature, but sustainably sourced. So we don't extract from nature. We're actually cultivating that in a lab to have an even higher sustainable impact. And there's a lot going on right now across the globe in terms of material research. And it's really exciting to see a whole lot of different studios being able to do this work, because it's really explorative, and it's very open in terms of access. And you're seeing a lot of things happening with upcycling waste and using that as an initial resource for the material.
And back to Leos for a second. Talking about the R&D side, are there different things that you're working with now that might give way to a new fixture in the future, a new approach to lighting?
Yeah, we're always looking at the sort of process as sort of a collaborator and an inspiration and something that's always being developed. So I think every time we turn on the printer or approach design generally, we're always asking questions about how we make things. And so we play around. We've been playing a little bit with color as sort of one piece lately. And we continue to make sort of mechanical adjustments to the printer alongside kind of different ways of thinking about it from a software side, which is usually rooted in, or almost always rooted in, the material itself. So what new thing might glass sort of be willing to do? And then how can we think about that, and how can that be the sort of seed for a new design series? I think what we like is that the process that we've been working with has never been a standard thing. It's never been a standard software package. It's never been a standard machine. And so everything has been new, and to add something different or to create a different process is kind of what we're doing anyways. So even things like, we've done some projects, like just some experiments trying to use organic materials back while we were at MIT and glass together, and or to use different types of materials that that have completely new processes. So it's always kind of totally open as to what we're making, and whether it's with metal or wood or canvas or something totally different, it's always kind of on the table because it's not really any more difficult to add something new.
Yeah, that spirit of experimentation really comes through in the work. And Aaron, I should ask you too, I love the idea that the textures on the glass that you make comes from these serendipitous encounters with things in the world. Is there something that you're dying to work with out there that you've stumbled across, or is there a texture that you haven't quite gotten to yet, but you want to work with?
No, actually, that's a really great question. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying in the video about how all of you interior designers and artists out there, you can make your own textures. I'm really trying to open this up to everyone. They can come to my studio, and let's say there was a piece of lace that was dear to your grandmother or a certain flower that you like. You can come and we can play and we can take our hands and we can push that into the clay and kind of see on the spot like what kind of texture that would make. And that's kind of why that's kind of the direction I see this going, and I want to create like a library of these different stories. Like I have my stories, like these are the stories that I've made, but I want to see the kind of stories that everybody else has, so we can kind of start to build this library and share it across the world. Like that piece of lace that was dear to somebody can end up in an interior window in someone's room in London or something like that. We can start to come together as a community in a world to just share these stories with each other.
And that process can become something very, very personal over time. Well, I want to ask it's 2020, it's been a weird year for everybody, to say the least, especially in the kind of lighting design world. It's, as a journalist, it's really strange not to be able to see this work in person, to really experience some of the things that we've been covering. But has your necessary responses to the pandemic had an effect on your practices? Has it changed the way that you're working? Has it given you ideas for new directions to take your practices?
I'll start. I went back to high school, actually, not literally high school. I used to draw so much in high school, and that's where that sketches series you see on my website comes from. I just kind of lose myself when I draw. So I'm taking it back to that initial pleasure of just creating something by myself internally. And there are a lot of sketches that are public, but there are ones that are still private, where I'm just exploring like line and form and shape and really getting back to basics on my own.
Yeah, you're not alone there. We've spoken with so many people that are going back to their first collections of things and sort of reliving some of the creative processes that they had, and also people kind of finding more time for a bit of slowness and contemplation. Though I do hope sooner rather than later we get back to being able to see this work in person. Are there any collaborations with designers coming up that you're particularly excited for, or are there any that you've done in the recent past that should be on people's radar?
No, nothing specifically that I can speak to right now. Nothing quite on the radar. I'm really building time and space to move my work into more of a three-dimensional space right now.
And Danielle, we talked a little bit about, or you spoke a little bit about the One Hotel project in the video. Is there anything else coming up for you that we should look out for?
Yeah, we have a couple of different restaurants and hotels in the works right now. But to answer your question earlier about the pandemic and how that's changed, I was thinking about that as it's forced us to go outside a lot during these last few months, and I've really thought a lot about our relationship with nature, and I'm sure a lot of people across the world have been reconnecting in a lot of different ways with the natural world. So I think it's a perfect time right now to start thinking about sustainability at the jumping off point of a project rather than an afterthought, and really to start to reform our relationship.
And Michael and David, I'll throw to you. We have a few seconds. Anything that's come out of this period for you guys that we should look out for?
It was definitely slow for a bit. We obviously had some projects that got put on hold, and we have the luxury, I would say, of being able to hold off on things for a little while, and which I think is a luxury that very few people have. And so it gave us a chance to think a little bit about how we wanted to design things and sort of just about get by. We've got a new series coming out hopefully by the end of the year called Morphogenesis, which is an infinitely variable, customizable series of lights, one of which is right behind us, which we're excited about.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see it. But thanks so much for everyone for participating, and thanks again to Wanna Design and ICFF for hosting CLOSEUP. It's really great to be talking to designers again. And EQ3 for sponsoring the North American Design Studio section of the event.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, William Hanley, Bill, for joining us on set and having these conversations with the designers. It's so lovely to have you in the space on set in Industry City. And thank you, Erin, for joining us here as well. And thank you to of course, Leos Design, joining us from Cambridge, Massachusetts, and to Danielle Trophy Design, also joining us. Thank you to the viewers for joining us for CLOSEUP. Special thanks again to EQ3. We're really excited to be able to have these North American studio sessions to give a chance to showcase their work and also give the A&D community the chance to source locally and really commission products and projects that are really special for their clients. So thank you for joining us for that. Do stay tuned. We're going to take a short break, but next up we're going to have at 4:30 Eastern Time, Amico in conversation with Megan Dwyer of ICFF.